Welcome, everybody. This is the Rotary E-Club of Silicon Valley, and we are excited, as always, to bring you the stories of people who are making a difference in the lives of others near and far. The idea in Rotary, service above self, is something that we apply as the Rotary E-Club of Silicon Valley to our interests in innovation, entrepreneurship, and education. And we look for people who are finding just really cool ways to be able to make that world a little bit better. So in doing that, I learned about the work of Joyce Mercado. Joyce is a Rotarian herself, retired from years and years at IBM, and just one of those people who finds all kinds of cool ways to make the world a better place. And is going to share a little bit of that with us today. She's the author of a book called Save the Planet in Your Spare Time. That's also the title of the talk. And Joyce, we are happy to have you. Welcome to the Rotary E-Club of Silicon Valley. I hand the mic to you.
Thank you so much, Rushton. I am very excited to present to your club because the planet really needs help and Rotarians get things done. So I'm looking forward to this. I've been looking forward to this talk. So the reason I wrote the book, Save the Planet in Your Spare Time, was last year I read a report from the Intergovernmental Panel of Climate Change. That's a group of scientists that do climate research and then write policy recommendations for governments around the world. And they came out with their report, and it was rather grim. It said to limit climate change to 1.5 degrees Celsius, we need to cut our emissions in half by 2030 and eliminate them altogether by the year 2050. So I thought, oh gosh, Joyce, you've got to do something more. Well, I had been acting as a climate activist in my town of Alameda, not only reducing my climate footprint, but influencing others to protect the climate. And so I thought, why not write a book about what I've been doing in Alameda so others could learn from it and realize even if they don't have a lot of time, they can be a climate leader in their communities. And this book would guide them on that process. So that's why I wrote the book. And then what got me started in climate protection to begin with was 20 years ago, I read a series of articles in the National Geographic, and one article had a chart similar to this that tracks the temperature of the Earth over hundreds of thousands of years and the concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. And you can see there's a strong correlation between the two. As carbon dioxide goes up, temperature goes up, and so forth. But then at the end of the chart, you saw what carbon dioxide concentration is now, and this is what made me panic. I realized this is a crisis. We need to do something more, and I need to do something more than just change a few light bulbs in my house. I needed to see whatever I could do to protect the climate. So I started with my own climate footprint, my own carbon footprint. First thing I did was haul the bike out of the garage and started using it for errands. I added baskets to haul stuff like groceries, and I added lights so I could ride it at night. And I finished changing the light bulbs to all LED, all compact fluorescent, and then when LEDs came out to LEDs. Everything that we consume takes energy and therefore emissions at all the different stages of its life. Getting the raw materials, manufacturing it, shipping it, and then ultimately disposing of it. And each of those produces emissions. So the less stuff we use, the better. So it's important to embrace the reduce, reuse, recycle, and compost mantra. I was already doing pretty well with recycling and composting, but I realized I needed to do a little more about reduce and reuse. So I went out and did a little shopping. I got a reusable water bottle, a reusable coffee mug, cloth napkins instead of paper napkins, and dishcloths instead of paper towels. I haven't bought those paper products in 2 decades now. And I eliminated the catalogs I was getting by calling the catalog companies instead of just recycling my junk mail. I went to a more plant-based diet. I started by eliminating beef and lamb because those animals burp up methane gas, a powerful greenhouse gas. And then I slowly eliminated chicken and turkey and those products as well. because it takes a lot of land to graze animals and to grow feed for the animals. So if we all went to a more plant-based diet, we could restore some of those forests. We could do reforestation. I installed solar panels on the roof, put up a clothesline, and then on my laundry, I was diligent about only doing full loads of laundry and switched from hot and warm water to cold water. Today's detergents are formulated to work in cold water, and most of the energy used for running a load of laundry goes to heating up the water. Then I also replaced our gas dryer with an electric dryer. And then most recently, we got an electric car. So that was reducing my carbon footprint. I did a lot more than that, but that's to give you a sample. But as I was going through and doing those things, I was getting frustrated because I thought, well, this is just me. I'm one person. We need lots of people to do these types of changes. And I found that from talking to people, they were willing to do changes. They just didn't know what else to do. So I put together a checklist of 70 items to protect the climate. And then on one side, and then on the other side is resources to help you do the things to protect the climate. And I've handed this out to thousands of people over the years. And the idea is that you can download the Word Pro document as well, tailor it a little to your community, and you can hand it out in your communities. The other thing I did as I was reducing my carbon footprint and taking on projects is I'd write letters to the editor about what I was doing and tips and benefits of doing it. And the benefit of this is that everyone reads letters to the editor. They're very popular to read. And for investing about an hour's worth of time, you can reach thousands of people with your message. I wrote so many letters to the editor that they gave me my own column after a while. So now I have a monthly column on climate protection in the town of Alameda in our local press. I also went to, after I retired and had a little more time, I went to the Al Gore Climate Reality Project training and learned to give presentations on climate change. So I was doing that to different community groups in Alameda. Then I started taking on projects in town. I noticed in my little leagues, my son's little league fields, they did not have composting and recycling. They only had garbage. So I called up the head of the Little League and said I'd like to help implement recycling and composting at the Little League fields. And he put me in charge with Tony, who was the man in charge of the garbage. And Tony's main interest was vermin control. But he said, well, I'm not against composting and recycling if you help me do it. So he wanted a list of the items from the snack bar and which waste goes into which bin. So I emailed him that. And signs, he wanted signs for the bins. So I created signs with the common items from the snack bar and what goes in each bin. And this worked very well. People would walk up to the bins. It was really rewarding to see. They would read the signs and then dispose of their items. So this took me just setting this up, took me 2 phone calls, 1 email, and making some signs. That was just a few hours of work, and we got recycling and composting implemented at the Little League fields. And then we're educating people about how to sort with the signs as well at home. Then I work with my Rotary Club to plant trees in local parks by working with the Parks Department. I called up the Parks Department, and they help figure out which park needs trees and gets the irrigation in place. I work with a local nonprofit to help us teach us how to plant the trees at the tree planting event, as well as procure the trees at cost. So this has been a lot of fun. The Rotarians love it, and we've beautified several parks in town with more trees. We also give away tree saplings once a year, our Rotary Club does, at our Earth Day event. And this is a great opportunity to speak to others in the community about our Rotary Club, as well as distribute trees so we get more carbon dioxide pulled out of the air. But just as important as reducing your carbon footprint is getting policy changes implemented as well. And so for that, there's two parts to it. One, I support candidates to protect the climate. And by support, I don't just vote for them. I help campaign for them by canvassing, writing postcards, phone banking, and so forth. And each of those things can take just an hour or two of your time to invest. And then once they are elected, we need to hold their feet to the fire to encourage them to protect the climate. And in the US, there's an app for that called Climate Action Now app that, based on your zip code, will automatically send a letter to your representatives about climate change. You select different letters to send. So that's a way of reaching our representatives in the United States. So you too can save the planet in your spare time. And I hope this has been helpful. And back to you, Rushton.
Thank you, Joyce. Good stuff. So let's go ahead and have you stop sharing. And what we'll do is we'll introduce the people that we've got on the recording. So at the moment, we have with us from our members in Houston, Texas, Roy Olson. Joining us as a guest and new friend of the club, Patu Betele in Missoula, Montana. My name is Rushton. I'm in San Jose, California. And let's start with this question. So, Joyce, you are a Rotarian. And so, you care about the planet. You're seeking to do things about it, things like this. What's the relationship between being a Rotarian and having these particular interests?
Well, the seventh area of focus of Rotary is protecting the environment. So it fits right in with my work as protecting the climate. So, and then doing projects with the Rotary Club, like planting trees and giving away saplings, fits in with the protecting the climate area of focus.
That makes sense. I'm gonna ask you some kind of next level questions about some of the things that are important. I'll start by saying that it's very important to me that we find ways to address our our needs to protect the environment as well. But let's start with this. So with recycling, a lot of the ways we have done recycling over time have turned out to be rather work and resource intensive themselves. So only certain plastics are genuinely recyclable. Requires a lot of water to do so. Have you learned some things about recycling more recently that gives you kind of hope for that as a path in terms of how we choose to do it as a community?
The only thing that I've learned recently is there is a new group that is working on recycling plastic film. So the stuff that comes wrapped around the toilet paper, the newspaper bags, all that type of plastic film. There's a company called Ridwell that will pick that up, and it turns it into park benches and other types of things made out of the plastic. But other than that, I'm not too familiar with the different recycling methods.
We had a speaker not too long ago that talked to us about interesting AI systems that are designed to have different tools reach into plastics as they're on a conveyor belt in order to identify through its AI recognition systems the kind that are most amenable to the systems that they've got. So that for us was a particularly interesting program. When we look at planting trees, all right, this is another one where there's all kinds of evidence that planting trees is really, really powerful. The kind of work being done in the Sahel and the Sahara to regreen areas that had been lost to deserts. But there is also a fair amount of what's sometimes called greenwashing out there, where companies say, "Oh, we're planting trees, and really what they're doing is they're involved in these programs that plant loads and loads and loads of seeds, but there isn't kind of a follow-up effort to help those seeds become plants and trees, and very little work done to track that. Now, as somebody who wants to see a lot of trees planted, what are the kinds of things that you've encountered that allow you to say, huh, if you're wanting to do pl tree planting, this is kind of the larger, more complex set of things that you should be thinking about.
Well, the first thing is irrigation. You got to make sure that you're going to have somehow get those trees watered, especially in their early years. So that's why I work with the Parks Department instead of just planting it on other areas, because the Parks Department is in charge of irrigation of the trees. So they put the irrigation in, and then we put the trees in. So that's the most critical thing is irrigation of the trees.
Well, that makes sense, and also focuses on the local nature of doing things that might be helpful to the climate, like is the focus of your book. And
Yeah.
we'll, by the way, for anyone watching or listening to the podcast on our YouTube page, on our SiliconValleyRotary.com page, on our podcast pages, you can find a link to the book she wrote in case you want to find out about the 70 other items that you can do with this as well. In the space of solar, so my wife and I installed a solar system in the past couple of years. Uh, First of all, our electricity bills have dropped precipitously, which is great. But I understand that one of the problems we are having is that if people aren't advocating for more systems to connect larger scale solar to the grid, that we're really kind of at the mercy of the logjam that is the transmission systems. Is that something that is addressed in any way in your book?
No, my book is focused on local communities. So what you can do in your local community, rather than the bigger picture of transmission of wind power and solar power on scale to communities. But it is an issue, and I think that one of the things was the Build Back Better Act, the Infrastructure Act that was put through this year. Is some of the money is invested towards transmission of electric power from solar farms and wind farms to communities.
Nice. We also had a really excellent presentation by a couple of Rotarians from the Rotary Club of Cupertino, and their project as a club was to say, okay, we're going to identify nonprofits that might benefit from having solar systems themselves, but may not have the capital to install them,
Mm-hmm.
and we'll work with them to get them installed. And so the Rotarians are helping, with the installation. So there's a lot of labor that they're putting into it as well. And so I can imagine that thinking locally may also mean that with something like the Parks Department, you're a voice out there saying, "Hey, why not have more solar panels above the parking lots
Mm-hmm.
in the parks, right? Because that would not only generate a certain amount of energy for the operations, but also be useful in terms of just providing shade. And as things get hotter, shade's a good thing."
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. That sounds like a good idea. Another project for me.
Well, if we're loading each other up with projects to save the planet, there's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
Tell me this. You have the picture about the different bins that are a part of some of the work you've done. One of the things that is visible on that slide is that in the one for trash, it says all plastic bags. So that's a recognition that, generally speaking, plastic bags are not recyclable in the same ways that PET bottles are, for example.
Yes, that's true.
Now, there is also a kind of thing out in front of grocery stores that will take bags as well.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know anything about kind of the nature of recycling those plastics? You mentioned the really good one, earlier about the hope that plastic packaging materials might be able to be converted to park benches, that kind of thing. But But other thing that that you've identified that made you think, that's pretty promising in terms of plastics that are often thrown in the recycling but are not good recycling items.
Yeah, the thing with plastic bags, putting them into the regular recycling bin, they jam up the recycling facility. So that's why you can't do that. But if you can take them to grocery stores, and they do something very similar to what Ridwell does. They turn them into park benches and other products.
Okay. So thinking about what constitutes good recycling plastic, right? Here's one of those questions that hits me on a regular basis, and I'd love your take on it. So, every week I put out my recycling bin,
Mm-hmm.
and we've loaded it up with everything that we understand to be recyclable. In the morning, before the recycling truck comes by, there are people who will come by and park and go from recycling bin to recycling bin to recycling bin, pulling out like the PET bottles in order to take them to the recyclers themselves. Now, so this for me is one of those things that like, huh. So on the one hand, I understand that they are incurring a cost when they get paid for the recycling items that they collect. On the other, they're doing part of the job of separating out the recyclable plastic from the non-recyclable plastic
Mm-hmm.
bins along the streets. Is that something you've encountered? Do you have an opinion on, or talk to anybody
Yeah,
about?
we have the similar thing in our neighborhood. And so the downside of doing that is then the garbage company doesn't get as much money, and so they may have to charge more for the service. But the upside is some low-income people are getting some much-needed income. And so I'd rather have the low-income people have the income than the garbage company, and even if I have to pay a little bit more. So we set out a separate bag with our aluminum cans in it, and someone always picks them up. So that's what we do.
I love that, Joyce. That's so cool. All right. Now, thinking about ways that these different tricks and tools and approaches that you identify in your book become useful to a community, how is this a part of what happens educationally? Have you done any work with schools that have to do with helping students learn about different kinds of plastics and solar and that kind of thing? Is there an educational component to the work you've done?
Well, the educational component that I've done is threefold. One is doing climate presentations to different community groups in town. Two is the letters to the editor, where I educate people about things that they can do one item at a time, and then how to do it and the benefits of doing it to encourage them to do it. And the third one is that checklist with the resources on the back to help them do the things on the checklist. And distributing that at community events to everyone I know, at the farmers market. At the end of my climate presentations, I hand those out so that people can be educated on what else they can do to protect the climate. I haven't done too much with schools. There are PTA groups that are really focused on greening the schools. There's a whole organization in our town called Green Schools that has implemented recycling and composting at the schools and taught the kids how to sort with signs and everything. So I don't get credit for that, but that was some good work that some fellow activists have done in town.
Speaking of activism, one of the trickier parts of addressing climate issues is that so much of what we produce in terms of carbon emissions comes from the meat sector, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so you mentioned this in your presentation, on how you reduced meat and out of your diet, that kind of thing. But that's also like this very interesting topic because it is not a simple process to talk about that without it becoming, kind of a different kind of political discussion. So I keep mentioning previous presenters we had, and that I hope is of interest to you. But
Yes.
we had Nate Salpeter of Sweet Farm talk to us about the really interesting work that his animal sanctuary does. He's also a nuclear scientist and a venture capitalist. So fascinating guy, right? And how he talks about, hey, we talk about the benefits of certain things, and we support companies that are doing really, really interesting work in the food and ag sector spaces. Um, but but we never really push say vegan approaches to the world, even though that we are, because I just don't know how good a job that will do of convincing anybody given our environment. That's a really long question that gets me to what are things you've done to help talk about climate issues in a way that is, in a sense, more amenable to people of all different political stripes.
Well, I try to talk, first off, I explain how it protects the climate, but then I also try to put in the other benefits that you accrue by doing so. So, like a vegan diet is very good for your cholesterol, and it's good for weight loss as well. So, each area, I try to point out what are some other benefits that you can achieve by implementing that change in your lifestyle. And then also explaining some, for example, on the food situation, uh, it takes 75% of the land that we use for agriculture is used for livestock. It's either grazing or growing the food for the animals. So if we didn't eat so much meat, we'd have a lot more land to grow food for people if it was plant-based, and then we can do the reforestation. So that all of those types of things that I mentioned didn't say climate change. They were about feeding humanity and reforesting the world. So it reaches different people that way.
All right, that works for sure. As someone who has, say, reduced my meat consumption, I'm just one of those people. It's going to be hard for me to ever give up bacon. That's just kind of where I am.
Oh.
Truth be told. Another thing that one might do locally is to address a problem that is common here in urban California for sure, which is that there's a lot of asphalt in places where it is effectively heating up the local environment in a lot of ways, right? And so, anybody who's stepped near asphalt on a hot day understands, what's going on with heat and asphalt. We had a speaker, Clara Norrie, of a outfit called ePave, where the idea is to actually create a different kind of substance that reflects heat in a more effective way. Have you
Mhm.
run across things like that where you're talking about, can we have better surfaces that won't cause as many environmental problems as the kinds of things we currently use?
Well, in our town, we try to discourage hardscape and do more natural plantings and with native plants than putting in hardscape. So that's been a focus in our town. But then, as far as roads and so forth, we have the asphalt.
Gotcha. Well, what we're going to do is we're going to wind down the recording. Although one of the benefits of being in our club is that we get to talk to the interesting people that we connect with, even after we stop the recording, which is good fun. And Rory and Patu and I will talk with Joyce a little bit more after that. But for all of you who've taken the time to watch this recording or to listen to the podcast, we appreciate that you take an interest in our work to share stories of people who are working to make a difference. It is always that case that when you go from, oh my goodness, the world is just in a terrible, terrible mess to I'm not doing something about it, that you just kind of feel better. And additionally, you find kind of purpose. And when we think about Rotary, we think about what it means to serve others in all sorts of ways, finding ways to address poverty issues and all kinds of things related to the environment and helping grow businesses in order to build local economies and all the other causes that are a part of Rotary. So we're glad that you've been a part of this with us today. As we always like to do, we hand it back to our speaker for the final word. So Joyce, what would you like people to have clearly in mind before they finish the audio or video that they have been taking in?
Well, I hope you'll consider getting my book. It's on Amazon, and you can also have your local favorite bookstore order it from Ingram Spark. And I provided Rushton the links to the Amazon website, as well as the link to my checklist, so that you can download the checklist. And I just want to say thank you for this unique opportunity. I really enjoyed speaking with your club.
Absolutely, Joyce. Thank you. Thank everyone, and we will see you next week.